My family's always been very strict on me. So when I finally had the ability to go off to college, I met the love of my life. I knew she wasn't the type of girl my parents wanted me to marry, but I didn't care. We were inseparable, so I decided to break the news to my parents, and oh boy, oh boy. I come from a very religious background, and it drives me crazy. As far back as I can remember, I've not been a fan of religion, but I had to keep up with the whole religious activity because of my parents. My sister Kate and I passed through high school without having a boyfriend or girlfriend. And this was not because we did not desire to do the same thing most of our peers did. It was simply because my parents would view us as joining ourselves to the world. The world was their way of referring to folks who don't believe in the same things which they did, or who weren't as religious as they were. My parents would drag my sister and me from one activity to the other, and we dared not revolt. The whole thing got me anxiously waiting for the day I would finally be free from their grasp. My moment finally came when I was done with high school, and I purposely chose a college that was far away so my parents would not come to visit. The day I went to college, I felt like a prisoner who just got his release. Before letting me go, my parents made sure I had all the religious books packed up in my bag, and they told me a million times to ensure that I never fell short of participating in religious practices which I had grown up with. All that was just noise to my ears. I immediately forgot about it once I left their presence. I can say, I began living my life in college. I did all I felt like doing, but this does not mean that I neglected my studies. It simply meant that I did not have to wake up very early at specific times each day to say routine prayers and other religious activities. Well, I met my first girlfriend, Anna, in college. Anna's the exact thing my parents would call the devil's creation. She was weird, in a good way. She found beauty in what others considered dark. She loves all dark and mysterious. Simply put, my girlfriend is Goth. And that to me is not bad. Being a Goth girl does not make her less of a human being. It simply means that she's differently wired, and that's not a bad thing. Anna moved in with me in college, and she transformed my room into her liking. Only God knew what my parents' reaction would have looked like if they visited me. They would certainly think I've delved into a cult or something. Besides, the whole dark and mysterious outlook that Anna had, she had an awesome personality. She exposed me to things I never even knew, and I believe we would both stay together for a very long time. I recently graduated from college, and I'm preparing to go home, but I know I'll have to keep my relationship with Anna secret for obvious reasons. My parents would be disappointed I started having sexual intercourse. And worse still, my girlfriend's Goth. I would just keep things quiet for a while. Update number 1. I recently went back home after spending 5 years in college. I thought quite a few things changed, but most things remained the same at home. The whole religious atmosphere, oh boy, it was still there. My parents were anxiously waiting to receive me, and they had gone announcing to everyone that I was returning from college after graduating as a mechanical engineer, and some of the people had gathered at our house to welcome me. Everyone was surprised to see a different version of me that they never imagined. From my outlook down to my disposition, they could tell I've not been faithfully participating in religion. The friends from the church who had come to receive me at her home simply began taking their leave while my mother broke down in tears, and my father looked at me in disgust. I wondered what the issue was. I'd barely been in the house for 10 minutes. After a while, my father walked away while my mother kept repeating my name as she cried aloud. The fact that my mother was calling my name meant that it had to do with me. The moment she said that I had backslidden, their way of saying I've stopped believing and behaving like them, I knew it was all about religion once again. I tried consoling my mother, but she would rather not let me touch her. I simply picked up my bags and went to my room. It was not the kind of welcoming I was expecting at all. I mean, for your son who's not stepped foot in your house for years, you ought to be grateful he's alive. Some of my friends died in college, and my father didn't talk about me for 3 years. He would not even respond to my greetings. My mother, she was worse. She would respond to my greetings or react to my presence with a, "How can you do this?" It was just annoying. I'd only spent 3 days at home, and I'd already felt like disappearing for good. Within those days, I noticed something else which was even more annoying than my parents' attitude. Some people from church, they would pay what I call a condolence visit to my parents, and once I came to greet them, they would act as though I was an abomination who was defiling the whole place. I felt out of place in my parents' own home. My father called me on the 3rd day, and I vented his anger and displeasure at me. He said that I've strictly disobeyed and disappointed the entire family by not following the path which had been laid down for me. My father just went on and on about how a disobedient child was likely going to end up in torment. The way they went about this whole thing, you would think that I've committed some sort of heinous crime like theft or murder. But all I ever did was change my dress pattern. And my dress pattern's not immodest, it's just modern. The way my parents and those who were all like-minded dressed, you would think that they were out of this world, probably fell out of the sky somewhere. I thought about letting my parents know that I was no longer interested in the whole, religion thing, though I did not plan on becoming immoral. I just didn't want to seem as fanatical as they did. While my father spoke, my mother cried. It was something else, I tell you what. I guess I was emotionally blackmailed by my mother's tears, to the point that I've just apologized for everything, even though I would never revert to the kind of dressing that made me look like an alien. An apology was a good start anyways. At least we could all momentarily be at peace. Well, I knew my apology meant I was going to resume my religious activities. And I did, though my heart wasn't really in it. It felt somewhat strange to me, to the point that I struggled to remember how it was done. I guess I've been so far off religion, I still kept my relationship with Anna a secret. A deep, dark secret. Everything was cool, but my parents showed up one day with some other people from their circle. They held a prayer session on my behalf. It was funny because they prayed like they were trying to pull out some sort of demon from my body. So I would never neglect the religion which they kept. I just endured the whole process because it was the only way I'd be able to accept back in the circle. I'm now in a desperate need of a job. Not necessarily because of the money. I just needed an excuse to stay out of the house. Update 2. I've finally gotten a job at an auto shop downtown, and I'm starting to save money to move to my apartment. I'm the most diligent and punctual staff. I come to work earlier than everybody and leave much later than they leave. My boss and everyone loves me for my commitment, but they just don't know my commitment is a result of not wanting to be at home. I was called upon by my father 3 weeks ago after I returned from work late in the night. I thought he wanted to reprimand me for coming back late, but I was wrong. He and Mother began asking me what my marriage plans were. I was stunned. I've never really thought about marriage, and even if I did, there was just no way my parents were going to let me get married to my Goth girlfriend. That would be the height of it. I did my best to evade the question. I told my parents that I've just gotten a job. I need to stand financially before even thinking about marriage. I further informed them that even if I wanted to get married, I would still need to look for a partner, and that was going to take some time. My parents were understanding, or so I thought. They just left the whole issue, let it die down, and I was grateful until I returned from work just a few days later to meet the most annoying surprise in my life. A girl. She was there, arranged by my parents. my parents have brought a girl to me to marry. I can't forget the day so soon. I'd received a call earlier from my parents that I was to come back home on time that evening, as there was something dire that needed to be dealt with. The whole thing smelt fishy and had me on edge, as I thought about the drama they were trying to pull this time around. I got home that day and saw a girl who I was mistaken to be a maid. When I learned that she was the bride-to-be, which my parents have arranged for me, I did my best to not hide my displeasure. I thought the lady was coming to meet her supposed husband for the first time should at least look like a prospective bride. She looked too shabby for my liking, and that was a result of the fact that she was the daughter of a member of my parents' church. My father began that evening by telling me the advantages of starting your family at a young age. He then told me what a strange-looking girl was doing at our place, and said the church would support us during and after the marriage. I couldn't argue with my parents that day. They dealt with the two excuses which I've given them before. They've provided a bride, and the issue of money was equally settled. I could not oppose, as I would then have to tell them that I already have someone whom I'm seeing, and we all know that's a bad idea. I agreed to go on with the proposal. My parents finally informed us that the next few weeks would be spent on outings, a term that they use for dating, just to find out better about ourselves. My parents were eager to watch me eat dinner that day, and I would later learn that it was the lady who prepared it. Ugh. I began going on outings with this lady, and it was just flat out boring. We never did anything fun, not once. Most of her time was spent doing religious activities or other like praying and resting. The few times we were permitted to meet outside the church, we had to do so under supervision of 2 elders appointed by the church. This was to prevent us from getting intimate and frolicking about. How can 2 people get to know themselves better when they would not be according privacy? The presence of the elders would compel both parties to live in pretense. This lady and I had to just carry ourselves in a sanctimonious manner, so the elders would not label us as worldly. I got fed up with the whole thing within a few days. I'm currently on my way home from the church where I left that girl crying like a little baby. It was clear from all the indications that we were not meant for each other, so I invited her to the church to settle the matter with her like a man. I told her we were not connecting, and there's no point in forcing what was not there. The lady would have none of it. She began telling me it was the devil, and that we needed to pray for me to stop the devil from coming between us. How ridiculous! This was no devil. I was not into her. If anything, it was the religion we both practiced. It made her look unattractive, in my eyes, and I certainly can't get married to a girl whom I'm not physically attracted to. I tried to make her understand before walking out of the church. I know the whole thing would raise some dust, but I would not bury my life with someone who I don't love. My parents, well, they're just gonna have to understand. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Update number 3 is coming out. It took 3 months before update 3 was released. Everyone in the comment section was going crazy. They thought that was it. The major cliffhanger was what the heck would the parents think and how are they going to react? Well, here's update 3. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button and let's jump into it. It's been 3 months since I ended my outings or dating with the lady my parents had set me up with, and the fact that I'm typing this is proof that my parents did not kill me. I got home that day with the readiness to tell my parents that the wedding would no longer take place. It's off. But they've already gotten the news before I even walked through the door. I'd barely gotten to the house when my father began questioning my decision. I told my both parents that I don't love that lady that they've chose for me, and getting married to her would simply be sentencing myself to a lifetime of misery. The same fate which my sister Kate is currently facing. My father began talking about how the church and the brethren had already been anticipating the whole thing, and how a cancellation of the union would upset the peace that existed between him and the girl's family. I apologized to my parents as I knew my decision had a lot of upsettings to do with it, and I told them that I was willing to apologize to the family of the girl if that was all it was going to take for peace to reign. I went further to inform them that I had found someone suitable for me. She was not a member of the church, though. I left out the part about her not being into the worldwide religious thing. My parents took their time that evening to ponder things. They later sent for me, and they did not bother asking me who Anna was. They just asked me if she was religious, the very question I've been evading all along. I told them that though she was not deeply rooted in religion, she was someone who loved doing things right. They soon demanded that I brought her to the home. This was something else that I was not ready for. I invited Anna the next day to the auto shop where I worked. We've never discussed anything about marriage before this, and so she was surprised when I told her I wanted to get married to her as soon as possible. She asked why the sudden desire to get married, and I made her understand that getting married to me would practically save my arse from a life sentence of misery. I assured her that this was not just a move to escape the planned marriage by my parents. I loved her, and would rather spend the rest of my life with her than someone whom I don't feel attracted to in any way. Anna accepted my sudden proposal, and I knew that although the first part is done, there's still a lot left. I still needed to get her to meet with my parents. Up until then, I've not told her how deeply religious they are, and the fact that they would object to the marriage. At this point, I knew I had to apply wisdom. I couldn't tell Anna to dress up in a way she would not want to, simply because she wanted to gain my parents' acceptance. Telling her to do that could send the wrong message that I was not proud of her being by my parents. I ended up telling her that my parents had a myopic way of viewing things, so it was best if we just carried on with the wedding preparations before she met with them 2 weeks before the date. I aimed to make sure she would have gone far enough with the whole shebang so that once my parents meet Anna, they could be pressured into letting the marriage continue as it's only 2 weeks away. Anna had no issues with my proposal. We met with her parents and the wedding preparations were underway, though I just kept my parents in complete darkness. I'd be lying if I said I was not scared at some point. My fear was in the way Anna wanted the weddings to look. I get the fact that the lady should be given the privilege of planning her wedding the way she wanted, but Anna wanted the event to have a deep, dark theme. Unlike the traditional wedding ceremony where the bride's decked out in white, Anna wanted everyone, including the bride, to appear in black. To make matters worse, she did not even want a priest. This was a really tough decision, because even if my parents were willing to let me marry her without raising dust, they would want the wedding to take place in their church. Anna didn't want the wedding to take place at the church either. I thought long and hard about the whole thing, and I decided to let Anna run the show, how she saw fit. We've been planning the whole thing for a while now, and we would finally be getting to meet with my parents by next week. As the wedding, it's coming up in 3 weeks. Update number 4. It's a week to my wedding, and as you can rightly guess, it's been filled with lots of commotion. Anna finally met with my parents, and it was worse than I could ever expect. She came to the house that day in her usual self, mysterious and dark. Her attire, dark, her hair, dark. She was a natural blonde, her lips were painted black, and her black leather boots matched with black pants which she wore. My parents were comfortably seated in the parlor, but they almost jumped out of their skin the very moment I walked in with Anna. The reaction was likely they have seen the devil. My mother held on tightly to my father as they both looked on in disgust. They were quite shaken to the point they could not respond to her greeting. The moment I introduced Anna as my girlfriend, my father absolutely lost it. My father said there was no way he was going to become in-laws with the devil. He immediately demanded that I took Anna out of the house. Anna was embarrassed, to say the least. I was angry at my parents, and they've called my lover the devil. Anna was angry, but she did not say a word. She did not even wait for me to try appealing to my parents. She just got up, took her bag, and made her way out the door. I went after her, but she asked that I let her alone and just go home. I got back into the house to find my parents eating themselves up because of me. I knew they were going to say the same thing they've always said each time I did not do things their way. They could be disappointed in me for all I cared. I was equally disappointed in them. Even if they were not supportive of my relationship with Anna, they had no right to embarrass her the way they did. I stood in anger as they both lamented that I had left the righteous for their daughter of the devil. I did my best to control my anger. They thought I was still the same boy who they controlled the whole of his life. They would have sung my praise if I've allowed them to dictate my life partner of me, just as they've done for my sister who's currently suffering in her marriage. I didn't talk to my parents that night. I kept malice with them for 3 whole days. The only thing I thought about was how I had to patch things up with my girl, who had been avoiding my calls ever since my parents called her the child of the devil. I paid Anne a visit to plead with her to give me time to sort things out. I made her understand that I was equally angry at my parents for their attitude towards her that day. She was understanding, but I knew I had to act fast as the date which we had already set for the wedding ceremony was fast approaching. There was no how I was going to keep malice with my parents forever. Yes, we were all angry with ourselves. Anna and I were not happy with them for the way that they've treated her, and they too were not happy for me bringing the devil into their own home. But I had to make peace if the marriage was going to hold. I would later meet with my parents to try to make them see that Anna was always on black. Her heart was pure. As they could imagine, they did not see reason with me. In a last bid to get them on our side, I finally informed them that the wedding date was due in 2 weeks, and the preparations have gone far. There was no way we could call every guest we've invited so far to cancel the wedding. My parents were angry, to say the least. My father asked how I could make wedding preparations without informing both of them, the church, the pastor. It was then that I told them about the custom-made wedding which Anna wanted to do. No priest, no pastor, no traditional white attire, no church as the wedding venue, Pops. If anger could cause an explosion, I'm a million times certain that my parents' anger at the moment would have consumed the whole country. It was that bad. They told me that such a wedding was only going to happen over their dead bodies. I pleaded with them to consider the fact that everything had been put in place. I knew they were mostly concerned with the fact that the church would slam them for letting the son deviate from the faith by marrying a worldly woman. My meeting with my parents that night was inconclusive. They, however, called me the next morning and informed me my wedding could proceed if Anna could only go in if she got converted to their faith and baptized as proof of her conversion. They equally demanded that the wedding would be held in their church, where she would appear like a bride and not something else. The condition was a difficult one because there's just no way the Anna I knew would subject herself to such religious practices. All the same, I spoke to her about it. Contrary to what I've expected, Anna accepted all that my parents had said. It was unlike her, though, but I was at least grateful she loved me enough to go through with it. We're currently preparing for her baptism, which would take place in a few days before our wedding. I'll update you when that happens. Everybody, Mr. Reddito here. Update 5 is not one you expected to happen. Once again, if you're enjoying the video today, smash that like button and let's see what's going on with the final update of the story. I finally got married to Anna, and it's not the kind of wedding anyone expected or saw coming. After accepting to be baptized, she began attending some classes at the church. These classes, which the church claimed were to enlighten her so she could see the error of her ways, it was simply an opportunity used to slam and condemn her lifestyle. I wasn't comfortable with it at all. I wondered how attacking and being overly judgmental about somebody's lifestyle would get them to share your view. What I found most surprising was the fact that Anna seemed to be loving it. She never complained about it once. How Anna could now start liking the religion that she'd always hated was something I found hard to understand. Yeah, we agreed she would go through the whole process, since it was the only way we could get the validation of my parents, but I never thought she would enjoy it this much. They taught her about prayers and how to participate in religious rites. The day of her baptism, it finally came, and the whole church was assembled to officially welcome her into the fold once it was done. Anna wore a white robe, she had no makeup on, and she had returned her hair to its original state. The pastor said some words before submerging her for a few seconds into the artificial pool that was brought into the church premises. Immediately, she was brought out again. He declared her one of them. They were rejoicing in the air as they all thought they've gotten a new convert, and people began coming to congratulate her on one after the other. Anna smiled as each person would embrace her and exclaimed, "Welcome, sister." The people who once regarded her as the daughter of the devil now called her sister, because she had soaked herself in water for a few seconds. My parents were not left out. They welcomed her as though she was the biological daughter of theirs. My mother referred to her as dear child, as she noticed she was glad Anna had come to see the light, a term that meant she now believed in some things, which they did. Well, the wedding finally arrived, and my parents, their pastor, and the whole of the church were gathered at the church. As a convert, the church supported us by hijacking the whole program for the day. They outlined the activities which we were to feature in our wedding, and when I saw them, I was disappointed to say the least. The whole thing was just going to look like another religious meeting. The agenda was to have the pastor preach, the guests, who were not as religious as they were, in the hopes as they would see more light, as Anna had. Everything was set. The piano was playing a beautiful piece. We were all anticipating the bride, and though she did arrive, it was an unexpected manner. Several ladies and guys began trooping into the church, but that was not a surprise. They were all dressed in black. Black hat, black glasses, black pants, all of it. Behind them was Anna. She looked like the crazy Anna I never forgot. I believe today was the day she brought out the Gothic nature in her hair. Her hair, which she had returned to its natural blonde color, was now dyed black. There was no hint or trace of religiousity in her. The whole thing looked like cultic, and Anna had a black cane in her hand as she made her way to me. Anna's interest unsettled everybody. Some were scared, while others were angry. The look of the faces of my parents and the members of their church said a lot. There was absolute pandemonium everywhere. They were surprised that Anna, who they had called their sister, was now back in her original state. I wasn't offended by her appearance, though. I was expecting my bride to be in the traditional white apparel since she had converted to my parents' religion. I finally got the memo. Anna had been so angry at my parents all along. She knew that the only way they would let her get married to me was if she joined their little assembly, and so she did, so just to repay them for calling her the devil's child. She played the whole church. I was glad, though, I later told her to get me involved from the start. Next, she planned on pulling a stunt like that. Anna knew that there was no way the church would get us wedded, and so she had arranged for us both to be driven to the courthouse, where we would go to get legally married as husband and wife. We have our own house, and we're both living together in peace. The commotion which we caused in the church was too great for the church to ignore. They sanctioned my parents for it. I think they suspended them for a while. My sister, who could not attend the wedding as she was living in a different part of the country, called to thank us for the prank Anna pulled on my parents and the church. She felt extremely happy, knowing that my parents, who had cajoled her into marrying a religious man, could not wreck my life too. I probably would not see or hear my parents for a long time, but that's very much okay by me. One thing's certain though, the last religious activity which I partook in while staying at their house, it's the last I'll ever do. I honestly did not see that last part coming. I thought that they straight up just convinced her to convert to their religion. But when she crashed the entire wedding, I was beside myself. I want to know what you guys think of this story. What exactly would you do if you were in OP's position and you find out your girlfriend was playing your parents all along? Go ahead and drop your thoughts down below, guys. That's all the stories for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next one.